am so disappointed that I cannot join you for this interview with Kristin Zhivago.
If you make up personas without talking to real customers, you're going to even further solidify the lie. And you can't make money on lies. It's not a good strategy.
I love her book, Roadmap to Revenue, How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy. This is everything we talk about on the Why and the Buy. I know you're going to have a fabulous interview with her, and I'll see you guys next week.
Hi, Christie.
Hi, Jeff.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had, we've had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it the Why and the Buy.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Why and the Buy podcast. I am Jeff Bajorek, and I am flying solo today. Christie wasn't able to make it, so I have got the task of interviewing Ms. Kristin Zhivago of Cloud Potential. How are you, Kristin?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. Good. It's a little weird to be here without Christie. I've interviewed people before. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's just one of those things where we really have a nice rhythm going, and it's just a little odd not seeing her face next to yours on the screen there. But thank you for being here today. Tell us a little bit about Cloud Potential.
We are a company that has dedicated ourselves to helping other companies find more customers. That's what we do. And what's been happening in the last couple of years with the explosion, really the revolution of mobile and Google being so powerful and so able to serve up what people want has really changed marketing drastically. And I've been in tech and marketing for about 40 years. And I would say that in the last couple of years, I've seen more change and faster change, and really it has more of an impact on your business if you're not doing the right thing than it ever did before.
So it's, I guess, more penal to not be doing the things that people are looking for. I mean, there's more to lose, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. And the smaller companies in particular are, but even the mid-sized ones and not even the large ones are just slipping. Their sales are slipping. And, they're good companies, been around a long time. They serve their customers well. But if they're not getting these basic really new things right, they're not where the customers are. They've gone somewhere else. My first book was Rivers of Revenue, How to Go Where the Money Is. And if you're not there now, there is no money. So that's been quite interesting. We almost have two economies now, the people that get it and the ones who don't.
I agree with that. Where do you think those larger, more established, long-standing companies, where do you think they miss the most?
Well, and it goes back to my second book, the Roadmap to Revenue book, where I talk about interviewing customers and finding out how they buy. There's still this concept that you can sell to someone when, in fact, they're over that. They're really over it. And when we think like buyers, we know we're over it. And we can actually assume everybody's over it. But the minute you put on your selling hat in the morning, you start thinking like a seller, and you think, oh, well, this will work. I just have to sell harder or make more calls or do other things to get people to respond. But the people aren't responding. They're completely in control of the buying process.
So I'd like to unpack that for a second, if you don't mind, because, and I've read it twice already today on LinkedIn from both sides of that equation. There is you just got to create the marketing. You've just got to be in the right place for your customers when they're looking at you or where they're looking for you. And on the other hand, it's, well, if you think you can grow your business without selling, then you've got another thing coming. How are you going to get revenue in the door? And then I read a third thing that said, well, if you are selling if you feel like you're selling when you're selling, then you're not actually selling. And there's just so much out there. I mean, to me, and I'm curious what you think about this. To me, I believe that there is another human being on the end of that transaction. And ultimately, you have to be paying attention to what that human being is looking for.
That's
because
right.
Until further notice, we're not selling 2 robots yet.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you have to pay attention. And there's just this thing about trying to automate everything, trying to put everything on autopilot, trying to just set it and forget it, that we forget that we have to have an active role in that sales process, whether it's facilitating a purchase or even, occasionally when we need to provide a little bit of education to the person that's buying. How do you handle all that noise, Kristin?
Well, even set it and forget it, even in the days of advertising and PR way back in the day, you couldn't even set it and forget it then, because after they responded to your ad, if you weren't treating them the way they wanted to be treated, they weren't going to come back or they weren't going to buy. It's just that now they can not come back and not buy and then go on Facebook and say, oh, I just had the worst experience with so-and-so. And now they've told their friends and their friends have told their friends. And if you're somewhat entertaining about it, even more friends will tell their friends.
Right.
Okay. So you could fool yourself before. You can't fool yourself anymore. And I think that's the biggest change. I think that the customer has become so in control and so equipped. They have a supercomputer in the palm of their hand now.
Right.
And they also know there's no friction to finding some other alternative. The other alternative is one click away. I mean, literally, you move your finger, a 16th of an inch.
Sure.
And you're 3,000 miles away looking at a completely different approach to solving the problem. So there is no loyalty. There's no, and it's interesting. We have an intern, Sean, who's really our writing wizard. He's a wonderful writer. And he's been going out and interviewing people on the street about their buying experiences online and what they like about websites and so on. And everybody's been saying, I don't want to be sold to. Don't come up to me in the store and ask me if I can help and all that stuff. Just leave me alone. Let me make my decision. If I need help, I'll ask for it. The tools they have, I think Google came up with this stat that 82% of all smartphone users say they use their phones to make buying decisions while they're in the store. Okay.
Oh, I do.
Yeah. Again, if we think like buyers, we know this. So you still have to have someone selling, but they aren't really selling. They're helping the customer solve the problem, and they might be the solution and they might not. But they have to get into the customer's movie where the customer is. You can't back them up and give them a pitch. You can't start your presentation with, we've been in business since 1994. We have 3,000 people. It's like, no, just answer my question. I'm ready to buy. Okay.
Right. Do you feel that organizations are missing because their customers are ready to buy and they're not ready to sell them yet because they feel that they need to start at some process?
That's one problem. Okay. Another problem is the very beginning of what you said about marketing and selling. And you said there are a lot of people that say you just have to be found. Okay. That's true. You still you have to be found. And that's more important than ever. If you look at the stats of phrases like shoes near me or Mexican food near me or whatever near me.
Sure.
That's breakout mode, which means more than 5,000% increase in searches for those types of searches. So you have to know how to make sure that you show up. And part of that is being in the 50 plus directories that are out there that Google pays attention to, making sure that all of your information is correct. There's a lot of grunt work associated with being found. But anyone can do it. If you know what to do, you do it. We actually started a site called beingfound.com because we're so excited about that whole concept that local businesses don't realize that they're sitting on a gold mine now.
Sure.
Google is sending people to them if they know how to make it easy for Google to find them at the right time.
Right.
So that's definitely true. Now, then we get into the scrutiny issue, okay? In my book, Roadmap to Revenue, I talk about the 4 types of scrutiny that people apply to purchases. There's 4 types of products in the world based on the amount of scrutiny. Light scrutiny is you see it, you buy it, impulse purchase, cheap, whatever. Sure. Medium scrutiny is you see it, you ask a few questions, then you buy it. That's clothing, that kind of thing. Heavy scrutiny is you see it, you ask a lot of questions, you get somebody else involved, you have a contract, a salesperson, that's like houses and cars. on the B2C side. And then intense is you do all of that, but you get married. It's long-term, it's enormous, it's ongoing, whatever. Everybody knows where they fit in that, those phases or those types of categories of buyers, but they need to map it out. And they need to understand all of the micro decisions, as Google calls them, and we call them cross points, or places where the customer comes and says, okay, I have this decision to make. I can go this way or that way. And you have to map those out. And then you have to make sure you're there at every single step. And part of that step might be a salesperson, especially if it's an intense or heavy scrutiny purchase. So it's not one size fits all. That's the point.
Okay, and I love that. And I've seen the, some of the inside. I've looked at the inside of your book and that roadmap there, and the hockey stick of profit and everything. Yeah. It's really delightfully put together. I'm a big fan of infographics. I just like being able to visually see things like that, and it's really cool. You kind of metaphorically put some things in there. I think people should go and check it out. Definitely pick that book up. But what I love is throughout that process is the idea that you can't just set it and forget it. You have to think. And I think that thought is being eliminated from the sales process, especially early on.
I agree with you.
And it hurts my feelings.
Yeah. Well, and rightfully so. And it's not just thought, it's empathy. It's now, the other thing that's really wonderful now, though, is while the customer has this supercomputer in the palm of their hand, marketers now also have tools that give them insights into buyers that when I started my revenue coaching career and started interviewing customers for my clients before I'd even give them any advice, and I always found that their perceptions were completely different than the company's perceptions. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to talk about personas, I think you mentioned that before we start talking. My problem with personas is that it's a way of categorizing and generalizing that has very little to do with what the person really is thinking.
That is exactly where I was hoping you would take that, because I think there's a value to identifying who your buyer is and what they might think like. That's exactly, or it's at least it's analogous to your infographic in the book. That okay, they could make a decision. Will they go here? Will they go there? How do we know which way how do we anticipate which way they're going to go, and how do we anticipate being on the right side of that choice?
Yeah.
At the same time, how granular is too granular when you go to define a fictitious or not fictitious, but a hypothetical person who might buy your product? Do we take them too far?
Oh, absolutely. And also we go off on the wrong track. Like one of the best speeches I ever saw, Dareth Lampkin, I think her name was. Anyway, she was speaking at one of the eMetrics conferences, and she said, okay, everyone in the audience, close your eyes. I'm going to describe someone to you, and then I'll tell you when to open your eyes. So she said, okay, she's in her mid-30s. She's tall. She has a couple of kids. She's living under government assistance. And so we were all sort of developing this image of this person. And then she said, open your eyes. And the picture on the screen was Princess Di.
Right.
And it wasn't what we were thinking.
Right. Not at all.
So that's one problem. This idea that we think we know. And again, I learned this the hard way by conducting these interviews for my clients. So my clients would say, here are all the things that are important to our customers. I say, okay. And that's what they'd base all their marketing on. All their copy was about that. Then I'd go and interview their customers in order to reverse engineer the sale and understand them and all that. And their list of things that were important to them was completely different every single time. Okay. Every time. And so then I come back in with the transcriptions and the report, and the CEO would just be sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe that we've been going this way and the customers are all over here and they don't even care about that.
Right.
Right. Shock. Scary. And then they'd get on the right track. That's the good news. And now you can do that with not just customer interviews, which I still believe in. I think you have to do it. It makes them real to you. But the tools that Google is giving you, that Google Analytics, Google Trends, SpyFu, Moz, Alexa, there's so many tools out there now. BuzzSumo, which helps you see which articles people are sharing and that type of thing. It helps you understand what's important to people and what those choices are when they need to go one way or the other, and what their intentions are, because we don't pay enough attention to intentions.
I agree. I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make in sales is making an assumption that your customer is doing something for one reason or another, especially if the assumption you're making is handed to you directly from your marketing department. There seems to be just such a disconnect because companies get very, very tied to their technology, and they get very, very tied to their product offerings and the shiny brochures and the beautiful websites. And it's wonderful. And it really is. And there are no lies. It's not about it's not about the features and the benefits. It's about the problem that you solve. It's about the outcome that is generated. Maybe they're buying your solution versus the other because it's just easier to buy, because maybe your restaurant was found on Google and the restaurant across the street wasn't, and there's just more traffic. But unless you ask or unless you look into the data one way or another, you're not going to know. And so you get a lot of companies that are successful despite themselves sometimes.
Yes.
And that success just leads them to further proliferation of this belief that we just had the best idea. Meanwhile, you talk to any of the customers and they're like, your name starts with an A and the listing was alphabetical, so I came to you. And how do you build on that, right?
I know, exactly.
I think a lot of companies do things wrong when they make those assumptions, but what do you think companies do right? Okay,
so let me just comment just for a second on that one thing you just, because I thought that was so interesting. One of the things that, again, it's this Google statistic, but something like 90% of the people who start searching for a solution are not committed to a brand when they start. And we're finding this in our own man on the street research as well. And a lot of them, I think it's 1 in 3 actually purchase from a brand. If they did have a brand in mind or they thought they'd be going one way, they purchased from somebody else just because they got the information that they needed.
Right.
So all of those branding experts are going out there and selling people on $50,000 logos and all that stuff. Golly, those days are done, over. I mean, you really ought to be focusing your time and attention understanding the information they need at that specific moment in their buying process. Okay, so what are companies doing right? Interesting, we actually conducted research when we opened up our company a couple of years ago, and we looked at companies in more than 30 industries, all different types of industries. And we said, what are they doing? What are the leaders doing in those industries? There's always 2 or 3 people that are just blowing everybody else away.
Right.
You know, and you look at them and go, what are they doing? And my partner, who's brilliant, basically ended up classifying what they're doing into 6 categories. And it was like they were keeping those plates spinning, like they really were focusing on those 6 categories and making sure they were optimized. And they all relate to your site, your website, but they aren't your site. They're part of your site. They feed your site. They interact with your site. And the 6 areas were customers. They understood their customers, where they were coming from, what they were doing, everything we've just been talking about. Mm-hmm. The search, they understood what Google wanted and how Google wanted content to be structured. Google's more about structure because it's a dumb robot. It's a smart, dumb robot, but it's still a robot. So you really have to hit it over the head and say, this is my identity. This is what I do. We actually build identities, search identities for our clients. So there's customers, there's search, meeting Google's expectations, pay-per-click. So they were definitely doing pay-per-click, which is one of the best testing grounds out there now to find out what people are really thinking and move quickly. And then conversion. So once they get to your site, where do they go? What do they do? Is it easy for them? Like you were just saying, if they make it easy, I'll buy from them. If they don't, I'll go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And then competition, looking at what the leaders are doing and just shamefacedly, non-shamefacedly imitating them.
Sure.
You can see the ads they're running now and how they're doing. You can go to SpyFu and it'll show you their whole ad program and how they're working and whether, which ones they've continued and which ones they've stopped. And you can imitate those ads. You just step on the shoulders of the leaders.
Wow.
And the last one is technology. It turns out one of Google's 200 criteria has to do with speed and how quickly you serve up images and how fast your site is and things like that. And you can and mobile readiness and all of that stuff. Google actually makes it easy for you to test your site and will even tell you what's wrong with your site for Google, not just responsiveness as in displaying on different things, but really how it looks to the user and how big the buttons are and things like that.
Okay.
So those were the 6 areas. And when we work with clients, we focus on those areas and try to optimize each one and make sure that all the plates are spinning.
You know, that's funny. It's interesting that you take a step back and you see 6 different areas, because I've seen all 6 of those different areas argued back and forth about which one is the most important. And forget about SEO. We need to be looking at this, and forget about this. I mean, and when you just take a step back and, well, guys, they're all important. Let's spend a little bit of time maximizing. We got to keep multiple plates spinning in the air.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's difficult to do, you know, but it's something that you need to manage, and you need to kind of, it's not, if it were easy, everybody would do it.
Oh, I agree. This is complicated stuff now. Yeah. This has really gotten complicated, and it's getting harder for the small business who's just, I mean, the reason I know you're interested in the why of what I do and why I'm doing it. I actually feel sorry for these. I've loved entrepreneurs all of my life. I have a very entrepreneurial upbringing and family and so on. I love entrepreneurs. I love people who get up in the morning and want to make the world a better place, and they try to take good care of their employees, and they're up against incredible odds, and, you know, it's tough. It's so tough. And then they go out there and they know how to make something or do something, and then they try to market. And they're just what you just said. There's all these experts saying, no. You need SEO. And by the way, I sell SEO, right? So that's what they're saying, that because they sell it.
Right.
And so there's all these people saying, no, you need this, right? And they're just confused, and they've tried. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs have said to me, well, we tried pay-per-click, didn't work, so we gave it up. Well, they weren't doing it right.
Right.
And they didn't know to look and see what their competition was doing, you know, and start there instead of guessing, because that's very expensive. Guessing is the most expensive thing you can do in marketing.
Yes. Yeah. It's akin to making an assumption, right?
Yeah. ASSUME. Yes. Yes, exactly.
You know, it's interesting. I've just kind of come to this realization recently. Maybe realization is a strong word for it, but I've thought about all this noise and being, you know, essentially. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb. It's not that far of a limb. I'm going to say that I'm a 2-person operation, because my wife runs the back end of the business, right? So I have to give her due credit. But as far as the operation standpoint and what I do as far as marketing and content creation and selling and the actual consulting work, and, you know, you feel like you have to do all these things. And then at the end of the day, there are days that will go by and I'll say, you know what I really love doing? Selling. You know how long it's been since I've just gone and sold something? Because you're working on the business so much that you have to maintain that balance of working in the business. And I got into this because I have such a passion for selling, and the idea that to take that business away or to establish a business means to take me out of that selling. There have been some times where I've thought, forget it. Forget the SEO. Forget about all the content creation. I got enough content. I'm just going to recycle some of that for a while. I need to go knock on doors if that's what I do, or if that's what I need to do. And it seems to me that there should be a little bit more research put in there than just knocking on random doors one after another. But sometimes it feels like, can I just get back into the arena and get punched in the face a couple of times and remember what that, you know, feels like?
Or just interact with people. I mean, and this goes back to that whole persona thing. If you make up personas without talking to real customers, you're going to even further solidify the lie. And you can't make money on lies. It's not a good strategy.
I agree. So
so that's tough. You're right. The getting out there and interacting with customers. Honestly, if you're not doing it, you almost need to just make yourself do it somehow, or set a time a week, like every Friday afternoon. By the way, Friday afternoons are really good times to sell. You don't think they are, but they actually are. People are happy to talk.
They are, because sometimes it's a break from doing that thing that they don't want to be doing. It's Friday afternoon. I still have to be here. I've kind of mentally checked, oh, this is productive.
Yeah.
That's funny. People don't think about that as the sales call being the welcome distraction. Yes, it's a distraction. It's an interruption. Well, when is it a welcome time to be interrupted?
Yeah.
Oh, Friday afternoon.
Exactly.
As it relates to selling and as it relates to buying, do we get carried away with the notion that we don't have to sell because everybody knows what they want to buy? Do we get carried away with the notion that all buyers know what they want? I mean, is it fair to, I mean, I don't know if that's a fair assumption. And one of the ways most salespeople or most high-performing salespeople are succeeding is by demonstrating to the prospect or the customer that they have a problem that the customer didn't even know they already had.
Yes, there's definitely an aspect of that. And I can think of that in a number of cases where the customer's thinking they want to go this way and they maybe have been online and they've decided that's what they're going to do. I'd hate to be a doctor in this day and age because how many times does the person, well, I looked on the internet and this boil looks just like a smallpox. Yeah. I must have smallpox. So there is definitely that, but you can't argue with the fact that now we have situations where customers know more about the product and the competition than the salesperson does. Because salespeople, and I'm a recovering salesperson, I'll always be a recovering salesperson. But you tend to want to just know it and then go with it. And today's customer just researches the heck out of stuff. I mean, and even to the point where the high scrutiny, low scrutiny thing doesn't apply sometimes. Like if somebody's really picky about a $4 item, they might spend 4 hours, finding the best version of that. You definitely don't want to walk into the customer and say, you're wrong. Right. Okay. You definitely do want to walk into the customer and say, where are you in your buying process? So that you can understand what they've looked at and the options that they've had. That's the very first question you have to ask. And then learn as you do that, as they answer you, then you'll know what they've considered and what you're up against. And so then you can say, okay, that's an interesting choice. And a lot of people do that. There is this other aspect of it. And they expect you to do that. They're hoping that you'll at least bring them. There was a guy, I can't remember, what is he? It's the Lion King or the Sales Lion or something. Very famous guy, goes around and gives speeches all the time. And he used to sell fiberglass pools. Okay. And he was up against the concrete pool guys. And he noticed that nobody in either camp ever talked about the benefits of the other guy's thing. Okay. So he started doing content that talked about both and really being upfront. Because one of the phases that people go through is comparing. Right. First, they do a lot of general research, and then they get very specific. And now they're comparing how many sites actually do comparisons. Honestly, you can count them almost on one hand. I mean, It's like eBags and maybe Amazon and a few others, but most people don't. And in fact, if you did, one, your site would be stickier. They'd stick around longer and two, they'd really trust you because you're showing them the pros and cons. You're right in there with them. That's the big mistake everybody makes. They don't get into the buying process with them because they're afraid.
That's such a great point. It's such a great point because for as much as buyers don't want to be quote unquote sold to, and we have to be careful about how we define selling because I define it differently than a lot of people do, which is what makes me different, which is why I can even do it, right? I can't sell the way you're thinking about selling, right? But people don't want to be sold to, but they also don't want someone to just say, yeah, sure, here you go. People, I think buyers want to be challenged a little bit. I think if nothing else, buyers want to be challenged if only so they can affirm their own original intentions.
Or not make a bad decision. Right. And this is especially true when there's somebody else involved, when there's an embarrassment factor. I used to rent myself out as a VP and go in and turn around departments and such. And one of the things I noticed about the corporate environment is the day you show up, they put this little whiteboard. It's not real, but it's a little whiteboard that's, just a little thing that goes on your chest. And every time you make a mistake, there's a black mark on your whiteboard. And if you get too many of those, because everybody knows how many black marks you have on your whiteboard. Sure. After a while, you'll there'll be people who walk into a meeting and nobody even pays attention to them because there's so many black marks on their whiteboard.
Right.
So one of the biggest motivators in the B2B sale is not embarrassing yourself.
Right.
It's not greed. It's not power. It's none of the things they show you in Hollywood movies. It's that you don't want to be embarrassed.
Right.
Okay. So you're right. So if I talk about, well, if you do that, then you're going to have this problem. And yes, we also have these issues. You bring that up too. The customer is really going to appreciate that.
Right.
Especially if they can go, and they will do this while you're on the phone with them. They'll be checking out what you're saying on the competitor's site. Right. Or looking it up in discussion groups. So there's no hiding from the truth anymore.
No, that's for sure. You can't pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It's right there. And I think that's one of the things that's most misunderstood about selling is that it's not the salesperson's decision. I'm a salesperson. It's not up to me whether or not you're going to buy this, Kristin. What I can do is educate you to the best of my knowledge. And part of that education is, well, look, they make good stuff too. So let's talk about their stuff. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about my stuff. This is why I happen to like it. And these are the issues that, look, nobody's perfect. If we had the perfect solution, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We'd already be installing that pool. Yeah. But what's most important to you in your neighborhood?
That's the question. That's the question.
So it's so much about selling anymore is empowering that buyer to buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that gets missed. I think that's... It's just been so thrilled to talk to you about this today because you got such great insight. And I love that everything that you're talking about has been very thoughtful, has been very well researched. It's been uncovered. You ask a lot of questions and I think you're asking a lot of the right questions of a lot of the right people. And I'm so glad to hear that I'm not alone out here.
Yes, that's a good thing. Yeah, that's good. And you're on the right track. That's the other thing. You're definitely on the right track.
Well, thank you. So, as someone who's written books, I know you're reading a lot. So what are you reading right now?
Well, actually, I read a lot of stuff online, and I know that I was thinking when people ask me that question, I have gone back to reading a few things. The World is Flat. I've started reading that again. Raving Fans is another one that my partner brought up, and I thought, yeah, I've got to go back. So I go back and dip into some books sometimes because what's happening now is the world is so different. You kind of have to back up and question all of your assumptions about marketing and selling. It really isn't. I mean, there's a card game called 52 Pickup where you just take the cards and throw them up in the air.
I don't know. It was my favorite game.
Yeah.
As a kid.
That's actually where we are right now with marketing. And the good news is it's because of the data that's available to us, we can actually get a clue as to where we should be. And because Google really does want to give people what they want, Google's actually very helpful about helping you give Google what people want.
Sure. Help me help you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been good, but it's worse than set it and forget it. You can't even begin to think that marketing is going to work the way it did even 2 years ago.
That is so cool and so terrifying at the same time, Kristin.
Yeah, it's scary. Yeah. Yeah. But it's learnable. I honestly, I've learned more in the last 2 years than I did in the previous 10.
That is so cool and so terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah.
So, Kristin, you touched on this earlier, but we asked this of everybody. What is your why? How would you put it? Why do you do what you do every single day?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying. And I actually kind of grew up in Silicon Valley and was surrounded by engineers. My husband's an inventor, and I love inventors. I mean, I can't do what they do, so I really respect them. But I also started to notice, and I was young, I started selling machine shop tools when I was 17. And I started realizing these really smart guys couldn't market their way out of a paper bag. They just couldn't communicate it. If they were selling Kentucky Fried Chicken, my old joke is that they would just say dead chicken parts fried in grease at 200 degrees. And that would be their data sheet, So and I've never gotten over it. I've never gotten over the idea that there's all these people out there with wonderful intentions and good ideas, and they want to help people and do something good for the world. but they can't get the word out, and they can't get people to buy, and they can't convince them, and they're just frustrated as heck. And there's all these suede shoe, tassel-toed people that are telling them, this is the answer. And it's not. There are a number of answers, but it's not ever just one answer. So they're wasting a lot of time and money, and the world doesn't get to play with their new stuff.
Right.
That's sad. So that's what gets me up in the morning.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. That's so cool to hear. And I love the way you ask questions. I love the way you tell stories. And I love the way you inspire us all to be better. So thank you for being here today, Kristin. I really appreciate having you on as a guest.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Wow. That interview gets better every single time I listen to it. Thanks again to Kristin Zhivago for being our guest here on The Why and the Buy. You can find her on Twitter at Kristin Zhivago or on the web at cloudpotential.com. We'll make sure both of those addresses are in the show notes. Christie's back next week, and we're going to talk with Justin Benton about the parallels between sales, life, and golf. There are a lot of metaphors there, and I know you're going to take something out of it. Until next time on the Why and the Buy podcast, just remember that when you know your whys, your hows, and your whats get a lot better. Hey, thanks for listening to us on the Why and the Buy podcast. If you like us, tell us. Send us a message at the Why and the Buy on Twitter, or leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you got this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Talk to you next week. How about the music on this podcast? We call them our house band, they call themselves Haskins, and they're based out of Plymouth, Michigan. If you want to hear more from them, go to haskinsmusic.com and check them out.